efficient to send a robot.
Yeah.
And so this is what we think of logistics, where if you look at the growth rates, I think global e-commerce is about 4 trillion a year, and that's e-commerce, and it keeps growing. And last mile logistics has that's about 100 billion, I think 131 billion or something at the moment, and it's still growing. And there still is not enough drivers to kind of meet the demand. So we try to fill gaps in labor as opposed to replace labor.
Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying, but I guess that most people, let's say about like in a base, Air Force base, you probably have drivers taking people from one way to the other, taking supply from one place to the other, right? And it's like their position, right? This is what they're
No, not
doing.
quite. So in an airport, these are very trained professionals. You can't hire a, let's say, standard driver who was normally just, let's say, previously Uber driver to the Air Force. It's a very
Yeah.
secure site. These people get 3 years of training.
Oh.
So there's also by their trained personnel where they're qualified. So let's take it away from the Air Force for a bit. Let's go to pandemic, for example. During the pandemic, we started semi-autonomous deliveries of taking medicines from pharmacies to care homes, where everyone knows how hard it was to get a delivery during pandemic, and there's the whole contact-free thing. That's a better, more practical example that it's easy to imagine of, where there's a shortage in the supply, and we fill it with robots. And there are many use cases like this where we can see more and more. People need to have their jobs, yes. Ideally, 20, 30 years from now, yes, let's maybe automate a lot more, and people don't need to work because we can make everything free. But I suppose my favorite example of automation is when the bank machines, we call it a hole in the wall, the ATMs were first introduced. A lot of people suspected that it's the end of bank tellers and all these things, but in fact, what happened is banks hired more people than ever because they were now free to do other things, and the ATMs actually expanded their network, so it was actually for the better. So this is how we like to think of ourselves and how we like to push our technology.
So you're a small company and you need to compete with these tech giants. So how are you able to design and build? You do both the hardware and software. So how do you do all of that and complete what you need to do in such like a small scope of people or a company which is so small?
Sure. I'm going to blame evolution. That's kind of sound like a weird answer, but so in evolved systems, species will do what they need to survive with what they have. So it's the same with startups. We didn't have $1 billion in our back pocket, still don't have $1 billion in our back pocket. So a large tech company like Google would happily install $1 billion worth of, let's say, a LiDAR sensor on all their cars. But because we didn't have that, we'd have to innovate and find ways to try achieve the same result without loads and loads of money. So we survived still. So what we did specifically is we thought, how can we get from A to B without using a specific type of sensor? And we found actually there's other ways where you could just use software, because the human brain does it so well, even that an insect brain can move from A to B without the complexity that we have. We move from A to B, a bat moves from A, all these species move from A to B, but with different sensors, different implementations. And we just thought like that, like if we were sort of a natural evolved system, how would we use a camera? And what do we do best? Software and intellectual power. And similar to a cockroach, how would that move? And so, we apply that and we're able to navigate just as well, and in many cases, even better, simply because we adapted to our constraints and didn't conform to the one way to do it. Because if you have $1 billion, we throw $1 billion at it. If you don't, you won't.
Of course.
We just did it. We just did it. And so, that's what we did.
Yeah. Like necessity is the mother of all creation or innovation, right? So I like I come from Israel and we have so many startups here. And I think that the fact that people are really first very practical in doing things, and then second, they start from nothing and they have this eager motivation to do something. I think it's so much more important than what maybe Mercedes might have.
Yes.
So I'm just
it's a giant, and also startups tend to be a lot more adaptable. Where an example being, I'm not going to name any company. Let's say an unnamed corporation might spend $1 billion to build a process, a method, a system, and this is the direction it's now going. They'll hire loads of people, then some geek or some university kid or someone designs a new type of algorithm that makes everything they've been doing cheaper, faster. For a corporation, it's not practical to just ditch $1 billion worth of research. They'll likely continue on with their implementation for a while, try to adapt it because it's a giant ship. But for a startup, we have once or twice said, the way we're doing it is just, there's an more efficient and just scrap it all. And then that's it. Let's do a sprint and rebuild this new structure, because we can do that as smaller companies. Because as the world changes, tech is more advanced, processes change, they become smaller, faster, more energy efficient. So we could switch our process in a matter of months and not have to think, oh, we have to stop the entire ship that's been here for years.
Yeah.